So it's really to look at the importance, the utility of science, technology, and innovation advisory mechanisms at a country level, at a regional level, and of course looking at the international and global arenas, the multilateral institutions. How do we mold this so that they can become much more responsive to the sort of contemporary issues facing people and planet today? A world, as Minister had pointed out, increasingly marked by features of a polycrisis, a planetary crisis, if you want to use it in ontological terms, where the world is just recalibrating on such a number of fronts simultaneously that it requires new thinking, new paradigms, new policy tools, new instruments, new cultures of policy making, so to speak. And I guess, also the kind of human talent that we need to put into the system to regulate the transition from the world that we know right now to a world that is still to be defined in future. And the sort of characteristics Minister spoke about are the ones that I think all of us are engaged with at different levels of scale, of course. Some of us are working at the level of national government, some are looking at regional institutions and relationships, and of course the transnational and the global issues of sustainability, of climate change, technological disruption, new forms of globalization and its obverse and so on as well. So how do we position these systems so that they become much more responsive to the needs of our time? And in that respect, of course, how do we enable these systems both to help us to address traditional problems facing humanity, some of the ancient unresolved questions of inequality, unemployment, poverty, and so on, marginalization of communities and so on, and the new, often existential challenges facing humanity, existential threats such as climate change, for example, the uncontrolled use of biological or chemical or nuclear weapons, the proliferation threat, exterminist challenges. How do we make sure that these tools that we set up in the 20th century, now going into the early to the mid-21st century, are primed in a way that can help us to deal with these issues where, of course, there are both unsolved ancient questions but also new questions facing humanity as well. And then also at different levels of scale. How do we make sure that as the world is recalibrating and finding new pathways to deal with these issues, that we connect the local to the national, the regional, and the transnational and international as well? And then how do we make sure that STI as a policy enterprise fits into a larger policy universe where there are the often competing policy domains in tension with the concerns that we as scientists and people in the technology space are faced with as well, and where other imperatives, cultural, political, religious, and so on, come into the political calculus? And how do we make sure that science, technology, and innovation, if it moves to the epicenter of policy making, it has a way of reconciling its own understanding of the world with those of other ways of knowing the world as well? And then, of course, there is the tension, as you know, between science and technology, that we have this rapacious development, the space of development of new technologies across all domains, from artificial intelligence to neurobiology to genetics and so on, at such a pace, outstripping the capacity of us as scientists to be able to understand what this implies for the nature of nature, our understanding of nature, how we interact with the world, ontological questions about the way in which we see the world. And how do we make sure that when we give advice as policymakers, that this tension is brought out also, that the unintended consequences of technological sort of forms of progress, can have feedback loops to fundamental questions about why are we deploying these technological innovations, in whose interest do they serve, and what are the kinds of consequences that we cannot maybe see right now, but maybe down the line, many generations from now, we have to contend with as well. And so this perennial tension between the technological innovations that we are making at such a fast rate, and our ability to reflect on what does that mean for not just humanity, but all forms of biological life on our planet, and the future of humanity, and of course, the planet itself as a biophysical system, the impact that these technologies would induce are key questions as well.